Hello everyone. In this lecture today we'll talk about data collection. We can use different sources to collect our data because as a research we need to find information for our research. So your research project, you need to find information and collect data. So you can collect data from primary data or a secondary data. So in this lecture, we understand what is the difference using the primary data or secondary data. So let's start talking about the primary data. The primary data is a type of data that is collected by the research by yourself directly from main source like observation, interview, experiment, survey. The search is not the point. The point is for primary data that you have to collect those data. You have to analyze those data. So if you employ the observation approach, that means is some kind of method of data collection or method that you use for your research that employs vision as its main means of data collections. So you have to watch your phenomena, observe the phenomena, and based on your observation, watching the phenomena, you can collect data, you can collect information for your research. The another type of primary data is interview that basically involve a one-on-one session with individuals, and you have to ask open-ended question, and you collect their broad open-ended answer without coming to conclusion or assumption about what the person is saying. You just collect using the one-on-one session. You just make question and collect data from the interviewer answers. The other type is experiment, usually made in a laboratory. You use some instruments to collect data. You usually have two sets of variables, constant variable, and another group of variables that are used to compare and measure to collect your data. And the survey. The survey usually involves developing a series of short, easy to answer, multiple choice or multiple answer questions that are distributed to a large number of people. Using a survey, you will work with population and sample. So we have a sample that represent that population, and we use your questions trying to find data from your sample. So just those are some examples of how can you collect primary data. Of course, you have more source of primary data collection. Talking about the secondary data, the secondary data is the data that has already been collected through primary source and made readily available for research to use for their own research. Someone made that research before you, collecting data and analyzing those data, and that information is already to be used for you. So it's a type of data that has already been collected in the past before you. That's why it's a secondary data. You're using data from someone. And the main source of secondary data, you can mention government. Lots of secondary data is available from the government, like census bureau, information from census bureau, or labor statistic, or health statistic. In Canada, we have an example of Statistics Canada. It's a website from the government Canada. It's a federal source of information. There are lots of information about agriculture, census. You can find information about labor health. So it's a very interesting and rich source of information available here in Canada. Another second data source is a publication. You can find data from books, articles, newspapers, and so on. And the third example here is our database. There are many specialized databases and archives that focus on providing data. Use the database is an interesting source of data because they not only provide you the data, but they provide an interface. How can you collect? How can you organize, index, sort, and work with those data? So that is an interesting source of information. You can mention here Web of Science, PubMed, EBSCO, and Google Scholar. So there are more database you can use, but those are most famous databases you can use for research. People usually use for research. Many work in bibliometric approach. So those are secondary data. So that is this lecture for today. So thinking about primary data and secondary data, this is the difference. Usually primary data, you have to make the research, collect the data by yourself using different approach techniques. And the second data, you can find the data ready to be used by you, made by someone.